How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program today. If you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you can get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast, social media links, all that. And as a reminder, if you text recipe to 33777, recipe singular, not plural, recipe 33777, I have collected enough recipes. I intend to revive that list. And yes, my next book will be a cookbook. Y'all, last night I made s'mores Rice Krispie treats, used Cinnamon Toast Crunch and Rice Krispie treats, and toasted some marshmallows and Hershey bars and threw it all together. Oh my gosh, it was fantastic. So at some point I will send that recipe out. Now, we've got to talk about actual other news. We have to move beyond. We may get back to it, but we got to go to other stuff because there's other stuff happening in the world. As you are probably aware, Kamala Harris has her new book coming out. And Kamala Harris seems to live in an alternate universe. In fact, Kamala Harris said in her new book, the idea that the trans ad that Donald Trump is for you, Kamala Harris is for they, them, wrecked her campaign was, quote, the conventional wisdom of middle-aged men who don't live in battleground states. And she did not, quote, regret my decision to follow my protective instinct for trans people. Now, what's so notable about this is, well, Dave Weigel's review in Semaphore, the headline, remember, her book's name is 107 Days. After 107 days, Kamala Harris doesn't know how to win. Why did Kamala Harris lose the presidency? In 107 Days, her memoir of the election she inherited from Joe Biden, the answer is a series of mistakes committed over years, mostly by other people. It was a stake for Biden to disinvite Elon Musk from a White House electric vehicle summit and make him an enemy. She shared this view with Biden's staff. It was a mistake for Biden to run again, a view she kept quieter about. It was her mistake to stay so loyal to Joe Biden and not give the view a better quote about their differences than there's not a thing that comes to mind, even though he'd weakened her campaign. Even after the lack of support from the White House, the debate night phone call, and the MAGA hat debacle, I felt I owed him my loyalty, writes Harris. The Democratic argument about why they lost to Trump twice will get fresh material from 170 days. 7 days, it doesn't absolve Harris, who has little advice for how her party can win again or answer the questions about immigration and LGBT rights that staggered her last year. One of the anecdotes in the book, and let me just read you this, because this one blew my mind. The former vice president succeeds in the campaign's planned moments, the debate, the convention. She struggles when she goes off the book. What the F was that, she asked staffers who book her for a long interview with health podcaster Dr. Mike, but brief her for a short one. Harris dwells on two of her unscripted responses to protesters, telling Gaza activists that they'll get Trump if they withhold their votes from her, and ejecting right-wing activists who claim they were just shouting about Jesus. She wins the moment and loses the post-event spin, blaming it on the conservative media. Democracy is complicated. It also is easily compromised by blatant bias, downright lies, and the media organizations that enable them. So she does this interview, a podcast, health podcaster, Dr. Mike. And it was not a great interview for Kamala Harris. Did not go well. And afterwards, she writes in her book, she looked at her staffer and says, what the F was that? She blasts her staff for not properly preparing her. And then she says to her staffer, that was a rhetorical question. And she only learns later that her campaign staff would now start asking each other questions and refer to it as that as a rhetorical question. I want to step back from this, because if you go back to her campaign time when she ran against Joe Biden, the biggest criticism from her staff behind the scenes when they did the postmortem of her campaign is that she refused to prepare herself. Staff would prepare binders and research, and she wouldn't read it. This became a continuing criticism of her from the Senate to the campaign trail to inside the vice president's office, that she would not be prepared and she would blame staff. She had high staff turnover. She apparently blames everyone but herself for her inability to win. But there's a larger problem here. It's not just Kamala Harris. The Democrats themselves seem incapable of winning anything. And I want to harken back to the first hour on the issue of Paul Wellstone versus Charlie Kirk. The Paul Wellstone memorial went very badly for the Democrats. I think the Charlie Kirk memorial is going to go very well for the Republicans. And what's very notable is some of the loudest voices criticizing it turn out to be paid by a dark money Republican group. You might not have heard that, but there actually is a dark money group funding high-profile Democratic influencers up to $8,000 a month to push the party line. And it turns out the guy who said the Charlie Kirk funeral is absolutely disgusting, riddled with speeches that only dial up the temperature. Stephen Miller's is particularly vile. Well, that guy, David Pakman, is one of these social media influencers in the dark money group portal for funds, the 1630 Fund. I don't think they're going to be able to vilify this memorial service because of so much of it being on television, including MSNBC, for people to see themselves. However, there's something else. I got to play you this audio from Harry Inton at CNN, their polling guru. Just listen to this. This is important.
What do you think?
Yeah, what are we seeing? You know, Donald Trump being underwater, Democrats saying, oh, this guarantees us we're going to fly high in the midterms. Let me tell you, this guarantees you nothing, because at this particular point, the Democrats are the New Orleans Saints of political parties. What are we talking about? Trust the Dems or GOP more on the economy? Who leads on the economy? Republicans by 7. Immigration, Republicans by 13. How about crime? A big issue for Donald Trump and the Republicans. Look at that. Lead by 22 points. So the bottom line is this. At this particular point, the ball may be on the ground, but the Democrats have not picked up the ball and running with it. If anything, at this particular point, it's the Republicans who are running with the ball on the top issues, the economy, immigration, and crime.
Give some context on this. Compare this when Republicans last took the House.
Yeah, let's compare it back to 2022. I think this kind of gives away the game right here. Okay, the GOP is more trusted than the Dems on the economy. It was 12 points in 2022. Slight decline in that lead, but still 7 points. How about immigration? It was Republicans by 3 back in 2022. Look at this. The Republican lead's actually gone up by 10 points. What are you doing, Democrats? My goodness gracious. And on crime, the Republicans were up by 13, and now they're up by 22. The lead, again, expanding by nearly double digits. So whatever Democrats are doing, it ain't working, Kate. It ain't working. Republicans have the lead on all 3 issues.
What's the reason that you are finding so far that's driving this?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's all about the center of the electorate, right? You win with independents, you win overall. And what do we see right here among independents? Republicans still have a point lead on the economy. They got a 10-point lead on immigration. They got a 21-point lead on crime. The bottom line is when you look at these numbers, Democrats should call their offices, because at this particular point, even if Republicans, or even if the public doesn't like what Donald Trump is doing, they ain't necessarily liking what Democrats are doing. And it ain't just a referendum on one party. You actually have to go out and beat that party. At this particular point, Democrats are not able to beat Republicans. They still
and again, this isn't as Donald Trump came into office. These are numbers from this month.
These are numbers from September of 2025. We still find that the Republicans leading on all three of these issues. And of course, this economy will be the key. If Democrats are going to win, they're going to have to likely win on the economy. And at this particular point among independents, you see that 1-point lead for Republicans. And overall, at least according to the Washington Post, they hold a 7-point lead on the economy overall as well.
You know, interestingly enough, Nate Silver is out today with a piece and says Democrats who want to shut down the government for health care funding, that they say that they're not going to fund the government unless the Republicans add money for health care funds, that their better attack based on all the polling would actually be tariffs. That if the Democrats focused on tariffs and Trump, they would be better off than what they're doing with their healthcare attack. That all of the internal Democratic polling is showing them that they should make a case against tariffs, and that's why they're standing and fighting, because of the economy and cost to consumers. And the Democrats aren't doing that. They're not doing it. There actually is data out there, copious amounts of data now, about negative impact of tariffs, and the Democrats don't care about that. They care about funding Obamacare. They've gotten really bad at politics, and here's why, and I need you to understand this more than anything else. If you read the excerpts, you don't even have to buy the book. I'm not buying the book. I read the excerpts. Kamala Harris' book. When you talk to Democratic strategists, when you read the writings of people like Heather Cox Richardson, or you go on CNN, forget even MSNBC, CNN, the thing that will stand out to you is that Democrats really believe they should be winning. Not that they can win, but that they should be winning. They are convinced since Barack Obama's election that the arc of history bends to the left. That's what they say. The arc of history bends to the left. So Donald Trump's first election was chalked up to the Russians. The second election win chalked up to the underperformance of Joe Biden. And they really don't think they need to change anything to win, because they really do believe the arc of history bends in their direction. And therefore, if they're just patient, the world will sort itself out and people will come back to them. And what you find when you read Kamala Harris's book, when you talk to Democratic strategists, when you look online at what they're saying, when you look at the Democratic pollsters, they have no idea how to win. The only guy who seems to know how to win is Harry Reid's former strategist, who's telling him you got to shut up about alphabet gang stuff and climate change. Stop defending trans women in women's bathrooms. No more boys and girls sports. No more boys and girls locker rooms. Abandon that issue. Stop talking about it. Don't admit to it. If they confront you with it, deny you support it, even if you support it. And they can't bring themselves to do it. They don't know how to win. And you know, one of the things that they're doing, one of the big things is they're now attacking the president on H-1B visas. The president, we'll get into this at the bottom of the hour, the president is raising the filing fee for an H-1B visa to $100,000. And Democrats are outraged about that they could take on tariffs. They're outraged about the H-1B visa program at a time the working class hates the H-1B visa. They have no idea forward. They got no path forward. Kamala Harris is showing she doesn't know the way to go. It's mind-numbing. You got guys like James Carville out there who are alienated from the far left because they're not woke enough and abashed wokeism. And so the Democrats won't listen to him. They won't listen to people like Nate Silver. They won't listen to, or remember, what's his name? David Shore. They fired David Shore in 2020 because he said that the rioting after George Floyd could provoke a backlash, and he was fired from his data analysis position with, I think, Data for Progress, because he had the wisdom to speak the truth and tell the Democrats, don't burn down America, and they fired him for it. They are so convinced of their righteousness, they can't figure out why they keep losing. Welcome back. It is Eric Erickson here. Phone number 877-973-7425. So there's an interesting fallout happening now in the New York City mayoral race. A number of Democrats, including Chuck Schumer, are refusing to endorse Mamdani. This is Schumer and Dana Bash on CNN yesterday.
Okay. Before I let you go, speaking of candidates, you've been asked numerous times if you will endorse Zohran Mamdani for New York City mayor. You always say you're going to continue to talk. There are two key questions here that you haven't answered. One is, will you ever endorse him? And two, what do you need from him to get your endorsement?
Okay. Well, first of all, I know him. We've had a good relationship in the past, and we had a good meeting 2 weeks ago, a very long meeting with a lot of serious questions. And all I can tell you is I'm going to continue talking to him.
What's the holdup?
I got to continue talking to him, and that's what I'm going to do.
Is part of the calculus that if you endorse a Democratic socialist, you're worried it will be damaging to your party, maybe even your chances of winning back the Senate?
I'm going to continue talking to him. Dana, you can ask me again.
Wow. And then there's Democratic Representative Gottheimer also on CNN. He's from New Jersey. Listen to this.
And it's not just his failure to condemn the phrase globalized intifada, which of course calls for the killing of Jewish people, but also many of his socialist policies, right, like state-run grocery stores, his historic attack on law enforcement. Listen, I think he's a very impressive candidate, and I'm not taking that away from him. But my problem is that he's a socialist, and he should be in the Socialist Party, not in the Democratic Party.
That's the ranking Democrat on the Financial Services Committee in the House, and Chuck Schumer, the ranking Democrat in the Senate. They really don't want that guy, the face of the Democratic Party, headed into the midterms. I want you to go to Vision Computers today if you need a new computer. If you've got a Windows 10 machine, time is running out for you to upgrade to Windows 11, because on October 14th, easy day for me to remember, that's my anniversary, they're going to stop doing security patches for Windows 10. And if you need to upgrade your machine, Vision Computer is who you need to talk to, and it doesn't matter where you are. I'm on the radio in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm in Watertown, New York. I'm in Miami, Florida. All of you guys, coast to coast, can call Vision Computers at 404-COMPUTE. Talk to them and see if they can help you. 404-COMPUTE or visioncomputers.com. Talk to Vision Computers. They can build you a new computer. They can upgrade your existing computer, and then they can be your IT service provider, where you get a special phone number. You can call them day or night, and they can fix anything that's up with your computer. They can remote in. They can take care of you, answer your questions if you can't figure something out. Fantastic customer service. Tell them Eric sent you. You could save some money. It's 404-COMPUTE or visioncomputers.com. Hello there. It is Eric Erickson here. Glad to have you with me. The phone number 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, delighted to have you. Let's talk about the H-1B visa program. If you haven't heard, the President of the United States has announced a massive increase in the H-1B visa program. Now, for those of you who are unaware of the filing fees for H-1B, they do vary. Originally, I think it was like $10. And now it actually varies based on the job application, where it's going to be. But it's a few $1,000s typically. A lot of academic positions are $2,200. Non-academic positions, $2,500. Technical positions can be a little higher. Medical positions a little lower. And the H-1B visa program brings in high-skilled immigrants to fill jobs for which they cannot find Americans. I want to start with an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal for this. The headline is H-1B visas are good for U.S. workers. It's by Samuel Gregg. He's the president of the American Institute for Economic Research and the author of The Next American Economy. Once you let the economic nationalist genie out of the bottle, it's difficult to stop it from enveloping the entire economy. Since January, the Trump administration has pursued an aggressive tariff agenda, taking a 10% stake in Intel and insisting the U.S. government can tell Nippon Steel how U.S. Steel should run its operations. It was only a matter of time before the administration applied the same logic of economic intervention for ostensibly patriotic purposes to the American labor market. This is what lies behind the administration's decision to raise the application fee for the new H-1B visas to $100,000 for every new applicant. The program, created by the 1990 Immigration Act, allows companies to bring high-skilled professionals into America to fill significant gaps in specialty occupations in the U.S. economy. Missing from the picture is appreciation of how H-1B visas benefit the U.S. economy, particularly the American-born workforce. In the first place, there is considerable evidence that the young, skilled immigrant workers typically granted these visas increase overall employment. One 2015 study of the employment structure of U.S. firms found rising overall employment of skilled workers with increased skills, immigrant employment by the firm, with the native employment expansion occurring primarily among younger workers. A more recent analysis by the National Foundation for Economic American Policy likewise concluded H-1B visa holders do not adversely affect U.S. workers. Instead, they contribute to lower unemployment rates and faster earnings growth among college graduates, including recent college graduates. Adding an H-1B visa holder to the U.S. workforce isn't a zero-sum game. Foreign workers with highly valued and often rare skills inject human capital and expertise into the U.S. workforce. This increases firms' innovativeness, and productivity. That's one side of it. Now, I want to read you Michael Green. Michael Green is Chief Strategist and Portfolio Manager for Simplify Asset Management. Graduate of the University of Pennsylvania. This is him. A $100,000 H-1B visa fee isn't a xenophobic policy. It's basic economics. The current system creates market distortions that hurt American workers, mislead policymakers, and ironically harm the very immigrants it claims to help. I'm making this piece free, he's a Substacker, because the underlying economics affect everyone, from recent graduates struggling to find work to young families watching housing costs soar to policymakers making decisions based on corrupted data. My subscribers subsidize this research, but some insights are worth sharing. What follows isn't economic commentary. It's an analysis of how artificially cheap pricing creates systemic distortions in labor markets, housing markets, and economic data itself. When Donald Trump suggested a $100,000 application fee for H-1B visas, the reaction was swift and vitriolic. Technology firms warned of loss of innovation. Economists framed it as a tax on growth. Advocacy groups called it xenophobia. Yet the outrage overlooked a simple fact. American families already spend far more than $100,000 for their children to compete for the same jobs. A 4-year degree from a state university costs $120,000, including living expenses on average. Private universities run 2 or 3 times that. Student loans and interest can push the effective cost towards $200,000 to $500,000. And after 4 minimum years of investment, new graduates are increasingly struggling to find employment. By contrast, under today's H-1B lottery, an employer pays just $10 to enter a foreign worker into consideration. American families invest hundreds of thousands of dollars. Firms risk the price of a sandwich. The $100,000 H-1B fee is not punitive. It recognizes that work permits are scarce public assets, not raffle tickets. We auction spectrum, carbon permits, and taxi medallions. The same logic should apply to foreign worker visas. Taxi medallions are a bad example, I would say, because we know that taxi medallions create scarcity and increase cost on everybody. Nonetheless, I got mixed feelings on this. I wanted to present you two sides. One is the Wall Street Journal, one is a Substack, one is for, one is against. I've got a friend of mine who is a venture capitalist out in San Francisco, who's a closet conservative out there, pretty open and notorious conservative when he's not in that city. He said the H-1B visa program is abused. Abused by companies he works with, abused by companies he knows of. I know a CEO in Silicon Valley who tells me the H-1B visa program is abused. I have a lawyer friend of mine in Atlanta, Georgia, who was able to reviewed an H-1B visa application for another lawyer that was seeking to import a South Korean woman into the United States. And do you know what her specialized H-1B visa skill was? Hairstyling. And they claimed she had unique insight into styling the hair of the Korean community in Atlanta and therefore was absolutely needed. She got the visa. She styles hair in the black community in South Atlanta. No Korean women. There is absolutely abuse. At the same time, I live, for those of you up in Connecticut on WICC, WTIC, y'all have got rural parts of Connecticut, I know, but a lot of you are very metropolitan, suburban. You've got, between Boston and New York, you got a lot of, you don't see a lot of stars in the sky. Drive an hour south of me, or an hour to the west or east of me, and you are in really rural Georgia. And believe it or not, this may be hard for some of you to understand. There are parts of my state where you can't find doctors and nurses who want to go work in those areas. And so local medical providers have relied on H-1B visa holders and have imported foreign doctors and nurses to work in parts of the state where the American kids don't actually want to go work. Unless you got a real passion for it, Waycross, Georgia, and I love you guys down in Waycross. There aren't a lot of doctors except those with familial ties who want to go down and work in Waycross, Georgia. But even more so than that, what about Hazelhurst and Baxley, Georgia? Now, again, I realize I'm saying names of places that those of you who aren't in the South, you have no idea. You don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm just telling you, these are very rural parts of South Georgia where the ground is flat, the gnats are everywhere, and no doctor with medical loans coming out of medical school wants to go work. And in order to get rural hospital training, they have to pay an arm and a leg for the good white or black American doctor to be the head of the hospital. And then they use H-1B visas and they bring in nurses and other doctors. You charging them $100,000 for that application, you're going to wipe out rural healthcare in parts of this country. Concurrent to that, a great friend of mine who works out in Silicon Valley tells me that they absolutely abuse H-1B visas in Silicon Valley. That there is no question in his mind that he gets cheaper labor than the American workforce, and contrary to all the data showing how American workers benefit, says they don't actually benefit. And in many cases, particularly the 40 and 50-year-old Americans, we've talked about this before, they go unemployed, they're never working again. And he tells me if you wind down the H-1B visa application, you further restrict it. You're going to force Silicon Valley in particular to get some people off the sidelines who can't get a job right now because cheaper H-1B visa applicants who may not even have as much experience as them get preferential picks. Here's what I'm noticing about the debate. The people who hate the H-1B visa program refuse to acknowledge there are cases where it actually is very helpful. Rural health care is probably one of the best examples. The people who defend the H-1B visa program refuse to acknowledge it is abused. And I know of ample cases of abuse. I know people who privately will admit their companies abuse it. And yet the defenders of the H-1B visa program can't acknowledge the abuse. I think reform is needed, but let's be honest here. You're not going to get anything passed through the United States Congress right now. Democrats will block everything. They don't want to give Donald Trump any sort of win. So the only way for the president to try to begin to deal with a system that is a necessary system but is also ripe for abuse is to raise the fee to $100,000. So only the most necessary people come in. Now, yeah, it's absolutely true. Some of American companies are just going to start opening field offices abroad, and they'll have their talent pool there. And that's the free market working around this. There's got to be a better way. The H-1B visa system is a well-intentioned system to bring skilled workers into this country at a decline at a time our kids are getting dumber and dumber, frankly, largely because of public schools. But also, it is abused. And there should be some honesty in the conversation about that abuse because it's well known it's abused. And the only people who seem to not know that it's abused are the chief advocates of the program. If they could just be honest, they might be able to point to a path for reform that gets them what they want, but also doesn't keep screwing American workers when companies can find cheaper labor from abroad and bring them here in various ways. Now, let me take Pete's phone call on this. Pete, welcome to the Eric Erickson Show. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Eric?
Great. What's going on?
I think you and I agree, as I've been listening to you talking about how the program is abused. The report that you read earlier that described how employment of younger workers went up as H-1B visas were increased, there's a long-standing reason for that, and it really lit my fire because I've watched it for 20 years in corporate America where, of course, they hire more younger workers because they're using the H-1B visas to replace the older workers. They even have them. I've watched people train their replacements, and they're required to train their replacement or not get their severance whenever they leave. So that was just my comment. That has always bothered me about the program.
Yes. And, you know, that gets to this conversation we had a couple weeks ago where if you are over the age of 50 and lose your job in this country, you've got a 25% chance of never, ever working again under any circumstance. And a lot of it is the H-1B visa program.
I'm 49 years old, executive level, and have been unemployed for 23 months.
Wow. Well, so what's your background? Well, we got people listening here. Pete, what's your background in?
Head of strategic partnerships. I brought in $20 million worth of contracts to Grady. But people in senior business development have been getting cut massively in the last 2 years because middle management has just disappeared. Sales management has disappeared because middle management is not really necessary with a remote workforce.
Yeah, and you know, interestingly enough, I was just reading this article how a lot of major companies are trying to get their workers back into the workforce, and a lot of the younger workers are refusing to go back, but it is having down chain problems for middle management and other situations. So hopefully you'll find something out there. But thanks, Pete. That great point that, yeah, it is older workers who are disproportionately shut out when you start in massive increase of H-1B visas. And again, just be honest about the problems here. There are real problems with the H-1B visa program. I actually support the program, but believe it needs serious reform because it's being abused. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Eric Erickson here, 877-973-7425. Let me squeeze in another call here before we go to break on the H-1B situation. Tom, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Hey, Eric, I'm good. Thanks for squeezing me in. So I hired and placed H-1B technical candidates for years, 25 years. And I've got a couple of observations very quickly. People are not, if you take that $100,000 and give it to the government, all it's going to do is take it out of the labor force, and it's going to push down the wages for everybody. The better way to do it is to take a look at the prevailing wage determinations, which is the reference wage you have to pay somebody from offshore to bring them on site. That is gamed terribly. The surveys on that are awful. They're very nebulous, and companies gain that tremendously. You could make the prevailing wage determination higher. You could tax it. You could say prevailing wage plus 20% if you want to bring somebody offshore. That's going to rise all boats, and it's going to make everybody who's coming in a lot more comparable to the people that are here already. That's a much better approach.
That is, look, it's great advice. I'm glad you got a sense of where to go with this, because I definitely think there's got to be reforms in this area, because I talk to a lot of people who work in this area, and it was not an area of law for me that I dealt with a lot. But man, the abuse is there, and surely there are reforms. People need to listen to Tom. He's got good ideas here. Now, I got a good idea for you if you're looking for a bank. That is Old Glory Bank. It is my bank. It is by conservatives for conservatives. Old Glory Bank was started out in Oklahoma. They actually bought an existing bank. At the time, there were a couple of conservative groups trying to start banks. And Old Glory Bank took the smart approach. They bought an existing bank. They changed it from a state charter to a national charter. And they have made an online bank for anyone in the country, and it's by conservatives for conservatives. They've been deliberate about their growth. They're the fastest growing bank in the country right now. They do business accounts, and they're very hands-on. Even though they're an online bank, they're very hands-on with businesses. I referred a business to them a couple of years ago, and they actually sent somebody from their business department to get to know the business as they were onboarding. And you can get to know them. Go to oldglorybank.com/Eric, oldglorybank.com/Eric. You can do checking and savings, business accounts, mortgages, car loans, CDs, you name it. oldglorybank.com/Eric, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply.